Hi, everyone. We're so excited to come live today. I'm Candace, a holistic wellness practitioner, and I have with me today Georgia Lee. She is an amazing human. I'm so excited. We had a little bit of tech issue, so thank you so much for the patience. But she's been doing transformational coaching for over 30 years, and she really helps leaders navigate those personal and professional transitions while aligning with their inner selves with their outer expression. So she has a lot of different strategies that help people bridge the gaps, break the barriers, and really find that authentic, aligned life. And so that they can leave that legacy that's both personally and powerfully positioned to live a valuable life. So I'm so excited to have you on. We've met through various connections and we're a part of the Outlier Project together. And so, again, I just want to introduce you, make sure that people know who you are and kind of a little bit of your background on what got you into the work that you're doing now.
And thank you so much, Candace, for having me. So, how I got involved in what I do. So, it's kind of a story that maybe goes back a long time to say like the year of 2000. And that's when I found misalignment in my work and career.
Okay.
So, living on the West Coast, high cost of living and the benefits were pulled out of my job. They were stripped. So I was a psychology social work major. I had just gotten married. And so I ended up back on shift work. So I couldn't get those degrees. And I was also in art. So it was interspersed in it. So, and that's how I became an English major. But staying on shift work is what drove the burnout and ultimately my collapse.
Right.
Chronic fatigue syndrome. So I leave the service in 2015. I retire.
Mhm.
But it's really been a journey of trying to get back on the track I was meant to be on. And, it's interesting. We say we're meant to be on something, but sometimes we diverge from a path and we end up somewhere else. But
Mhm.
it's really a learning experience. And in a way, I didn't get to get those 2 degrees while I did studies. What I realized is I was meant to learn things because we have a lot of counselors who they have textbook knowledge and they're great at what they do, but I have some real life and real world knowledge.
Yeah.
And so it was a matter of coming through as a veteran. Sometimes you don't get served. It's very hard.
Mhm.
So fighting red tape, and I realized this is 10 years later after I've retired. I
Mhm.
still haven't gotten served as a priority one patient.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you serve yourself? How do you get back to the track you want to be on? So that is psychology, social work, kind of coaching, pulling a lot of the English arts in.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I started building what I've built.
Yeah.
So in a way, I'm not even a typical coach. I kind of have what I call a storytelling platform. So one of my main modalities in coaching is narrative coaching.
Mm.
And it's like, okay, so I can't teach English. I don't have the master's degree. I'm not going to be able to get those certifications. And one of the problems women veterans have in employment is they can't get the right certifications.
Oh,
But
good.
then vocational rehabilitation, I mean, you won't win. So it's like, how can you create a winning solution? And so the track I was on before was kind of when I was on the social work psychology track back in a long time ago.
Yeah.
It's really, they have something called a bibliotherapist, or where you get into myth and narrative arts
Mhm.
and you get deeply into depth. So a little bit of Carl Jung.
Mhm.
So I can't go back. Obviously, I'm not diagnosing people. I'm not a therapist. But how can I still pull that forward and still have the dream that I lost?
Mm.
And so I pulled it into transformational coaching.
Okay. Okay. So just to kind of recap, you were in the military as a service member
Yeah.
in the psychology field and really helping in the social work aspect, which we all know how valuable those workers are and how really misunderstood they can be because you deal with such a variety of caseload and there's not enough practitioners to be able to serve at the best capacity, and we all know that. So
Yeah.
you were experiencing burnout. You then retire to not know what the next steps are, and you're kind of in this transition of, well, I wasn't able to do this over here, which was get these 2 degrees that would have helped me transition. And so despite all of that, you're taking all of your experience in the social field and your experience with being in transition and not really knowing what the next part of the dream is. I love that you said sometimes it's like the path we're meant to be on. And I agree. I think we evolve over time and we're able to really see that each step in our journey leads us to exactly where we're meant to be for that season. Sometimes it falls away and we have to learn how to be okay with that. Um, so what I'm hearing you say is that now what you do with these transformational coaching, your different methods of helping people find their dream is based on all of that experience. And one of the questions that I have for you is like, why do you feel it's so important to have the way in which you connect with people? So you're, again, the background of really having that transition period. Why is this so valuable for anybody that's in that transition that you're working with?
And I'm not sure I totally, like, I got part of the question. I didn't get the
Yeah.
other part.
Yeah. So I guess, why is this work so important to you?
It's a heart mission, and it's a mission. So it's a mission that when I look at who I am as an MBTI type, I'm perfectly aligned in the work I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
and helping people is what I love to do. And because I have the experience, I get clients that come to me and they're like, I've been going to this counselor for years. And so the counselor doesn't get it. Well, they get a lot of great things. They just haven't been through the the hard stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting. I'll pick out other things, but part of it isn't just experience. So MBTI types play a huge role in what I do. So
Mm-hmm.
my MBTI type, one of the gifts that I have is I could see interconnections between things that most people would never find a relationship between.
Mm-hmm.
And I could figure out how they're related. So that's a lot of how I created my own business. And it's how I help people because, we think of getting into deep spaces. That's an MBTI type, but it's what I've been trained to do my whole career. Working in operations, having to pick out needles in haystacks is what what I got really good at. So I'm the person who figures out stuff that other people typically would never find.
Well,
And
and that's
helping people, it helps people move forward because they're like, oh, I was so stuck and now I figured out why.
yeah. And so you're able to really piece those or pull those pieces and threads together for people where it's like, I know I often see clients like looping in the same patterns and they're not seeing the correlation between these different aspects of their life. And you're like, yeah, okay. One thing I do want to say and ask is when you're mentioning these types, is that a part of your program? Do you help people identify that, or is that a part of your training and background?
It's a little bit of my background, having worked with people in development most of my career. So I also worked in education and training management. So training, teaching, leading, coaching. And part of my coaching too, I pull in MBTI because I can pick out stuff. And it's interesting. I'll have somebody do an MBTI test and they'll read it and they still won't get it.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm the person who has the gift of seeing how is that related and how does it relate to every other form that I gave you to fill out because I'm analyzing you.
Yeah.
So that's my gift is I'm an analyst at heart.
Right, you're an analyst at heart. And over the last several months, as we've noticed that so many people are going through transitions, and this wasn't like a prep question that we had, but as you're noticing all the people that are going through a transition, what are some of the things that you have been able to help guide people through in this moment? Because we're seeing so much job loss. We're seeing people really having their whole life basically shift from underneath them. And I think you have a lived experience from what I'm hearing of this. So how are you helping those people right now?
And transitions, for some people, they can be easy if they're well planned in advance. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people don't plan in advance, or life happens and there's a job loss or a medical condition. And
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, they're thrust into this huge change.
Mm-hmm.
So it's helping them, with coping skills, but also helping them see other possibilities.
Mhm.
So as a person who sees interconnections, I can give people every test in the world and they won't see it, but I will see it. So I'll
Yeah.
be filtering and digging through everything, looking for the connections. And sometimes people aren't ready to accept something. They're going to say, well, that sounds really boring. But what I know from my experience is that it's spot on for who they are. So sometimes we'll go around in circles, but they're going to come back and land on it and say, yeah, I get it. I get it now. And they actually sometimes, when we get pulled off our path,
Mhm.
it's hard, but it can actually be a good thing because there's something better in store. We just have to find out what that is. And
Yeah.
it's a chance really to try something new in life.
Mm. I love that. Well, and I heard you say like sometimes they don't like the process, and I think that's a part of coaching.
Yeah,
Really,
yeah,
do. I think so many people have an idea of what they're looking to do, and sometimes the back end process, it's kind of like setting up any system in the back end. It's not always the fun work that we're doing, but it's actually what's making the transformation happen. And so
exactly.
and it's like then your clients get it later because they see they're like, oh, okay, now I'm finally like piecing it together.
And
And
too, sometimes people like they're not ready to hear the real answer.
right.
So in realizing that, it's empowering people to find the answer themselves because they like to take the ownership.
Mhm.
So we could spend quite some time and I'll beat around the bush. We'll go around in circles and I'll ask 1,001 questions and I'll be like, oh my God, they still didn't get it.
Yeah.
But I know that at some point they will, and they're going to feel so empowered when they finally figure it out.
Right. Right. Well, and it's kind of like, sometimes we plant the seeds and then things come, like anything that we plant comes into fruition like months, years down the road. And so
Mhm.
it's being able to like finally piece that together. And that's part of what makes your coaching a little different. What I'm hearing is that you help empower them to find those answers. You're not just like, hey, I'm going to diagnose and it's like, hey, I'm going to build the connection pieces, but we're going to have you a part of that process. So can you elaborate on, how narrative coaching or integrating the arts really contribute to that personal development within your practice?
Well, sometimes when, we're going through all these transitions in life from the time we're a child to a teenager, figuring out who we are for the first time, and oh, in the overwhelm, I have to have a professional identity. And
Mm,
then all of a sudden you're mid-career and you're like, this isn't who I am. I don't like what I do. We know that over, I forgot the exact number, 40 something percent of people, they get into mid-career and they might know what path they want, or maybe they don't. But narrative coaching, it helps go deeper into the world of story.
mhm,
So from the time we're born, right? We're born without stories, but we take on all the stories. It could be stories of caregivers, stories of the systems around us and what we're programmed to believe. So it's trying to figure out what are those stories that may be holding somebody back, what's keeping somebody stuck,
mm.
and let's go in and rewrite that narrative.
Okay.
And sometimes in rewriting the narrative too, we could be dealing with habits, we could be dealing with attachments, and sometimes there's points where I have to refer clients out, and we talked about a multidisciplinary approach.
Mhm.
And so different people have different gifts and ways of working. And so I don't want people to be stuck in life. So having a referral system of people I can share a client with is really important because I've been there where
Mhm.
I didn't have the right resources and nobody ever referred me out.
Oh, wow.
So that's become a really important part of the work I do. But in reauthoring a story, it could be we get very attached to the person we were or the role that we had. And we have to realize that our whole life, who we are, is very fluid.
Mhm.
And even our MBTI type, while it's kind of in a way ingrained, it doesn't mean we can't change something if we want something different. But we might just have to work a little harder. So it can be reframing the stories that we're telling ourselves. But
Mhm.
whenever we take away something, right? Whenever we leave that void, we take away that old story. We have to replace it with
Mhm.
something is more powerful. So
Mhm.
that way it can take root, and that way they can get that lasting change that they're after.
Yeah. Well, and that goes back to how the human brain operates. Like when we take out, a lot of people don't know this, but like if we take out a habit, like we have to replace it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we're just searching for that old habit, and that's why we fall off the truck or whatever you want to say. And it is about being able to reframe things in that empowering way, because I'm sure you've seen this so many times in your practice where people come in and they have those narratives, they have those beliefs that they've built over time, whether they're theirs that they're carrying or generations even prior. And being able to see them unlock in that way is so, it's, I always say beautiful, but it's really unique, in being able to see them really transition and feel more empowered to either make the big change that they're wanting to make, or even if it's a shift in maybe company to company, right? Like being able to see them take that ownership has to feel so rewarding. And then I want to also say it's really amazing that you said, like, I will refer people out
yeah,
when it's necessary. I'm the same way. Like, I have my practice, I work with clients the way I do, and I'm really good at knowing, hey, you know what? I have this person who could also help benefit over here.
yeah,
And it's like when you're really taking it from the holistic approach, it's like we can't, it'd be no different like if we were to go to the gym and only work out or only change our nutrition. Like our physical health and our holistic health would only change so much. It would change like a couple of degrees this way, but when we're incorporating the whole integration of, it makes it so much better, and we're able to see lasting and sustainable results over time.
right.
um, and it sounds like you're really great at identifying the root cause of where people are coming in at. And in again, I'll just go back to the current state of things. Like for, people that are going through these transitions and they have these old stories of maybe it's scarcity, right? Something like
Yeah.
scarcity. We see this a lot. How would you guide them in this moment? Like, I know that we're not trying to say that we're going to say, hey, it's going to be okay. Like, but how do you guide people through that hardship of, I don't know what's next?
That is great because one of the things I write about in my book is, boy, oh boy, aggression.
Mm-hmm.
And do we need to have it? And I've seen so much aggression, and it taps into the scarcity mindset. So one of the ways I work with people, so I pull in a hero or heroine's journey into my coaching.
Mm-hmm.
And I also pull in archetypes, and there's literally hundreds of archetype types in the business world. There's 12 primary ones they use, but in the coaching I do, I could pull from any bunch of archetypes depending on, and I customize it usually for every client. So for a woman, it can be like, okay, let's go into the shadow side of this archetype. Maybe you're in the ruler or the queen archetype, and maybe the shadow side is domineering, or it could be, maybe it could be the hero archetype where you're trying to save everybody and you're burning yourself out because you're saving everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can be any continuum on the career spectrum. It can be with leaders who, maybe they have a very domineering style,
Mm-hmm.
and because they have to control everything and they're trying to micromanage, that can be a form of burnout. So it's
Yes.
figuring out. So I love to dig.
Right.
So I'm the person if you want to solve a problem, but it's like let's do some deep diving and figure out what is that stuck pattern. Is it something that you were conditioned in?
Mm-hmm.
Is it, and sometimes it's just the work center we're in, and how do we deal with, so we're in a work center and it's scarcity mindset, right? People want to compete and not collaborate.
Right.
And we know that the best teams are built from collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
But you can shift yourself into an abundance mindset,
Mm-hmm.
but you can't make other people shift. So sometimes you have to learn and shift to, okay, how can I protect myself at work? So let's work on developing maybe a protective persona.
Mm-hmm.
about being fake, but it's about how can I help you protect yourself in a really toxic job, or you have that coworker or person who is not in abundance, they're in scarcity, and maybe they take your work for credit. And sometimes we react. I've done it. Sometimes we have that day where we've failed emotional intelligence,
Mhm.
and we're human. We can just say, "Oh, I won't do that again," right? I won't, and Facebook is pretty notorious platform for it. And that's where I've done some of my learning, and like, okay, you can't say that on Facebook. You can't respond. But
Right,
we take it into coaching and say, okay, we have a client that might be doing it. And we're like, okay,
right.
it's hard because you're in that moment, but let's put that aside for 24 hours and come back to it.
Right. Right. So not necessarily having to be so reactionary in our daily practices of like communication and yeah, and I mean, I think too, being like you said, aggression, I think we've been super aggressive since 2020. And I have my own ideas on that. Like I feel like the world stopped and paused all at one moment, and anybody that had never been forced into that kind of pause really had their energy unsettled. And so it just kind of opened this gateway for us to really be more inward and have more introspection moments and be like, okay, why am I so unsettled? Like, yes, we have this massive thing going on the external, we can't control it. But then also, like, I haven't looked at my dog in a half a year and I see that Fluffy is not doing so well. It's like,
Uh-huh.
I mean, like it opened up different opportunities despite the hardship that we were under. And aggression has just, I think that we confuse aggression with standing firm in our foundation of understanding. So, like, we feel like we have to be assertive to have that ability to say what we mean and what we want other people to hear. And so we just tend to go right into the aggression mode of like, I have to be heard. If I'm not heard, here's how I need to be heard. And and again, it's coming from the wounded space of communication. And so when we can really take a moment to just be and recognize, okay, what's my part, what's their part, and how can I bridge the gap, the best that you can. We can't change people, like you said. It's like I live in a very abundance mindset, and that's been something that I've grown into even more so over the last decade. And I can always tell when people aren't, but that doesn't mean I hold judgment. I just know it's where they're at in their journey. And so being able to, yeah, protect yourself is so important in that whole process.
And
And
we all carry like our own stuff. And I think about the world of veteran transition is all scarcity, where you have to fight for everything. And it's
Mhm,
hard because sometimes everything keeps getting taken from you, and
mhm,
you fail to rise. And I've done that before, where I was ready to rise, but I failed to rise. I got
mhm,
beat down.
mhm,
We have transition issues, and it isn't a perfect system, and we have great people in the system, we have some not so great people in the system. So then you find yourself where you want to be in abundance, but you find yourself struggling and fighting because you're just trying to survive the day.
right.
But it's trying to pull back and trying to say, okay, I can't control you. I
Mhm.
can't tell you how to be. I don't like how you're being, but I'm not going to be that way. And that's really sometimes all we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned your book, so I want to
Yeah.
touch on that. What really birthed your book, and what's your book title, and what can people look forward to reading it about?
So this is my book. It's Dream a Journey. It's longer than a typical title, but Dream Journey: Breaking the Dream Barriers, a guide to bridging identity gaps in life and career.
Hmm.
So part of what brought this about was when I retired from the military in 2015.
Hmm.
Um, I went through a really toxic ending in my career. I mean, I've had great work centers. The last one was just really rough.
Hmm.
But I also had chronic fatigue syndrome. I had burnout. And at no point in, even to date, has any medical provider really sat down and explained what I went through. I had to figure it out on my own.
Hmm.
So maybe there's good Doctors and nurses, I'm sure there are, but I really didn't have that experience. But part of the whole transition stress is you just want to rebuild who you were.
Mm,
You want to rebuild yourself, you want to reinvent yourself, but we get into some of our systems and they're so mired in red tape
mhm,
that it's you can only have something that is on their list. But
mm,
if you're a woman, and we know women leaders experience burnout at higher rates like I did, you
mhm,
need to find alignment. And part of what I went through too is why I couldn't get the master's in English while I was still in the service was they never programmed it in the system. So
mm,
imagine you have an earned benefit. So in asking the VA, can you just restore this for me? Can you just give me a few classes so I can maybe teach online or tutor?
mm,
And I couldn't even get that. And I'm like, okay, I want to rebuild who I am. But I
mhm,
began researching, this goes back to 2015.
mhm,
I actually got terminated from my care at the VA in
mm.
2016. And they're not supposed, I don't think they're supposed to do that, but I guess they can if they don't know what to do with you.
Oh, wow.
So I had to figure out my own solutions. Identity loss, like I had no services, I didn't have any help. I
Mm,
was taking on all of the financial burden, all of the medical burden, but I had to figure out, how do you reclaim your space? How do you stay grounded
mm,
after a toxic job? How do you, and that led me to the world of professional identity. When I was doing all this research, and I'm like, well, we're operating below the minimum level of occupational wellness. So in my book, I redefined what is occupational wellness. So it's defined in it, they define it as doing work that is basically aligned with your values. But I've taken it a step further and I've added the word identity because
mhm,
I think if a lot of people have the tools to figure out who they are, maybe we can prevent burnout. But so that's a whole lot, and it was trying to figure out, what did I go through? What about this toxic job where I just felt erased as a professional? And it took me into the world of also veteran transition. I was dealing with so much aggression,
mm,
mostly women leader aggression, and I don't know if it's just people so scared they're going to lose their position.
mhm,
And it was looking for answers, and it was an exploration of things like the mother wound,
mhm.
identity. I felt like a real anti-hero in the country I served.
Oh, wow.
I would see heroes walk in the VA and walk out with 100%, but you have a woman who has never been served. And it was this explanation of, why am I going through this? And um, so, and it also goes into the world of work, where our values had shifted from, I grew up with the world of work. And so motherhood wasn't impressed upon me, even though I really wanted to become a mom. I
Mhm,
didn't really admit it. And, we have this world of work where a woman you can just do all and be all. And I don't agree with that. Something has to give somewhere.
yeah, yeah. Well, and it sounds like what you're saying too is, you wrote this book because you recognize how much of our identity is really formed from the work that we do, whether that be being an entrepreneur or working with an organization, within an organization. So much of our personal identity is wrapped into that, and when we're misaligned, it seems to trickle into all aspects of our life. I know, I've seen it so many times where, again, it's those cycles and the different woundings that we have from our experience. And while, so many people don't understand how important it is to find those inner woundings, and it can sound really woo to some people, but it's like, when you carry it, you're really so much of it holds you back from the highest potential that you could be living within, because we either have a scarcity mindset, we have imposter syndrome, we have that self-doubt. And then when we do come against these hardships like what you were talking about, where you're like, I actually don't know what I'm supposed to do in this moment. Like, I had this plan to at least have some kind of support, now I have zero. and I just want to rebuild myself. And I love how you have, altered even from rebuild yourself from who you were, because it's like we can never really, like, how do I want to say this? Like, we'll never get back to where we were. We're only going towards who we are. And it's like, how do I bridge that knowing and get to the place where I'm meant to be next? And you had to like take it upon yourself to figure things out. And like, while it's unfortunate that you had to do that, I'm so glad that you took that as an opportunity to really allow your journey to help serve the next person who might be going through that, because I'm sure that there are so many service members that experience that same transition hardship, where they're just stuck and they don't know exactly what the next steps are, and they don't feel valued. Like, you really hurt my heart whenever you said, I didn't feel like a hero in my own country, like service, because there's so much that you've seen and gone through and everything. And so again, thank you so much for your service. I think we don't fully know how much you guys go through. And even as a military spouse, I only know a quarter of what my husband's actually been through, and from his perspective, right? And so again, I say all of that because you took your journey and now you're like, okay, I don't want anybody else to have to go through this, so I'll serve as many as I can in that capacity. And so, just to kind of wrap things up, like, if somebody's interested to work with you, what's the best way for them to connect with you and have a conversation?
So I have to admit, I don't always plug in the dates into my online Calendly, but the best way to get a hold of me would be probably by email. So georgia.elysiandream@gmail.com. Or you can go through my website and submit a request, but those would be the two best ways to get a hold of me.
Amazing. And I meant to ask this at the beginning, just to, we'll end with this, but how did you come up with your name for your business? Because I love the name Elysian Dream, and I just would love for everybody to know where it came from.
That is such an awesome question. So when I was trying to build a business, I envisioned this healing garden, but I couldn't figure out who was going to give me millions of dollars to build my dream. That was kind of a problem. So, and I was trying to tie all these pieces together because reinventing my life. So I create at a higher level probably than an average person, but part of my reinvention was trying to just pull in all the elements that were important to me. But so I was digging through a box of old papers, and I come across a play I had written decades ago called Journey to Elysium. And so Elysium in Greek mythology is a blissful, peaceful paradise where heroes go after a lengthy journey to find peace. And so I thought, well, that's such a clever metaphor to pull into my business. So, and Elysium didn't sound right, but Elysian and Elysium are very interchangeable words. So that's how I became Elysian Dream. And within the world of myth, so myth is part of a little bit of what I pull into coaching. So you also have the land of dreams, and you have the river Leith. And the river Leith is where you go to basically forget who you were. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this whole business concept came together. But I have to tell you, it was summer solstice a few years back, and I had been invited to create a meditation. So, and it was really one of my first opportunities to do creative writing. So I am not, I'm not necessarily into earth-based religions. I don't necessarily have a belief, but I'm open to things. And I'm like, okay, I have this great meditation. So, but people can perceive things the wrong way. So I think some people perceive me as this like woo-woo coach. And I'm like, that's not what I am. I'm many, many things. So I've kind of pulled back from doing events on the solstice just because of the whole misunderstanding with it. But it was really me just actually having fun and writing, and but also in creating Elysian Dream. So coming from the world of Space Force, it's now, so I work for Space Command, it is now Space Force. But I lived in a community where our street names were, Constellation, Celestial, Neptune, and rockets that we would launch are Atlas, Thor. So it was pulling in, and that's kind of how I pulled in, and all of the stuff I do, and looking back to the 90s when I did what they call deep look surveillance. So when I used to fly with AWACS, so that's kind of how I came up with deep spaces identity coaching.
I love that.
So I'm kind of a nerd at heart. I have to own it.
That's great though. I think, there's the way in which our business names come about is so special because, and yours has so much depth to it. You're like, I mean, I was seeing it in my mind as you were saying it with, it's the warrior's journey to peace and bliss after the battle, right? And
Yeah.
you've been there, you've been through so many different battles in your life. And oh my gosh, a whole new other conversation that could be had about your experience in the Space Force. Like, wow. I'm sure you have seen so many beautiful things. But, again, like our business names hold so much energetic value. And thank you so much for sharing your time with me today. I know we had a little bit of tech stuff, which, it
Yeah.
happens, like it just happens. But I hope that if people are interested, they'll reach out to you, especially anybody that's in a transition or veterans that are really looking to re-identify and pull into who they are in this next phase of their being, so that they can be guided in that direction too.
And
So,
my ideal people aren't necessarily like, I don't do positional skills based training anymore. So
mhm,
my ideal people that I work with are people who are really stuck in their career.
mhm,
Maybe they're going through burnout or trying to prevent a burnout, or they don't know how to get that change.
mhm.
So if they want to find their answers, I'm their woman. So
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you everyone who hopped on. We will be checking questions in just a little